Edc534 Leap I, why don't some people believe in science?
Many people claim their thing is under assault by culture, but yo, this might actually be true for science. Hey there, friends who love science, or other people who may hate it. My name is Trace Dominguez. This is D News. It's a science show. Just FYI. Cool. Yeah.
Okay, so you know who the author speaker is here. It's Trace Dominguez from Science News or Discovery Channel News. He welcomes friends who love science or other people who may not like it so much. You know, as a science person, I'm okay with that. If not a science person, you know, maybe I wouldn't continue to watch. Maybe I would. Who knows?
Yes, I know science isn't literally under attack. Not really. I mean, earlier this year, the former Secretary of Justice of the United Kingdom did say, quote, people in this country have had enough of experts. And at the time that we filmed this video, the possible head of the EPA here in the US has called climate change policy one of many pretexts for expanding government and called global warming phony and not based in science. Plus, the vice president-elect called climate change a myth and a theory, and the president-elect said it is not caused by humans, though it may be a hoax perpetrated by China, where humans live, so someone's gonna have to figure out how that vogues. Maybe we should call in some extra experts. Maybe the UK has some out there. Meanwhile...
Okay, so his purpose here is to explain why people automatically distrust or ignore science, even when concrete evidence is presented to them, and potential catastrophic outcome that may occur from ignoring scientific evidence. He hasn't talked about that quite yet. He actually takes a little bit to get into it, so I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler there. As far as what he does to attract attention, you can see where he brought in some cuts from different politicians, Trump and Pence and the EPA chief, so on and so forth. And, you know, typically they're non-science people in their anti-climate change propaganda. You know, when he makes a joke about Trump thinks it's a hoax from China, but it's not caused by people. But then how is a hoax caused in China if there's not people involved type thing? Then he also makes a comment about maybe you have to bring in some experts from the UK. I'm not really sure where that joke comes from. I'm not sure if that means there's no experts in the US or there's some kind of inside joke that I'm not aware of. So as a viewer, I may not know that or expect some of the other viewers to know it as well. There's also some kind of slick graphics here, and you get a little jingly music in the background, which helps hold attention.
According to multiple reviews of the scientific literature, 97% of publishing scientists who study it say climate change, global warming is real. It's happening now, and we need to do something about it. The sea levels are rising, and the 16 warmest years since 1880 have all been in the 18 years since 1998, with most of that temperature increase happening since 1970. The science is settled. There's a lot of evidence, and yet people don't believe it.
So we clearly see his point of view here that climate change is real. 97% of all scientists believe climate change is true. And also he talks about 18 of the hottest years have been in the past 20 years, roughly. You know, he also talks about, you know, the sea level rise, and you see pictures of deserts and glaciers, so on and so forth. So he's obviously a proponent of climate change. And then you had the politicians who were proponents against climate change. And it's up to the audience to decide whether they're going to be pro-climate change or anti-climate change.
We're sitting in a metaphorical car sinking in a river and debating how we got off the road and whether cars float. It doesn't matter. We need to do something about this other thing right now. Why don't...
Okay, so I'm going to bring up that point. He uses this little metaphor, the car going off the road and into the river. It doesn't matter how we got there or if the car is going to float. We need to kind of fix this right now and, you know, get out of the car and get to safety. So just want to keep that in mind. Towards the end of the video, I'll go back and talk about that then.
Don't people believe evidence? A 2015 study in the Annals of the American Academy of Political and Social Science explores that exact question. But before we look at that study, let's back up a little bit more broadly. A study in Public Opinion Quarterly points out politicizing something like nuclear power at all renders arguments about the environmental benefits invalid, even if there's a consensus. Basically, when something is politicized, we tend to react emotionally and stick to the status quo because change is scary. So knowing that, let's go back to this new study about why we hate evidence so much. Researchers created a model of human cognition to see why people don't believe evidence, even when it is right in front of them. They believe essentially we have a problem separating our emotion from our decision making. Political opinions and ideologies are part of those emotions. Let's say I'm asking you about global warming. According to their model and other research they cite, within 200 milliseconds, you would feel something called hot cognition, basically prejudgment of the topic. You've already evaluated your feelings on this and thus have an opinion, even without thinking about it. And that hot cognition and your emotions are then tainting how you feel about any evidence that I'm giving you.
I'm not so sure about this. I've, as a science person, I've heard about global warming, climate change for decades now. I've heard all kinds of, videos, podcasts, written books, so on and so forth. And when I first found this video, I think I looked at it with an open mind. I wasn't had any preconceived notions, so I thought it was bad or good. I wanted to see what he said. So I think he's underestimating his audience, at least a portion of his audience, that's going to come in and not really consider what he has to say and be attached to it emotionally.
For example, if you've been told humans cause climate change and you believe that climate change equals regulation and that regulation is bad, then because of hot cognition, climate change equals bad. It only takes...
Again, I think that's a bit of a leap. Not everybody's going to go directly to climate change is bad because regulation is kind of associated with both of them. I think most people can kind of separate that and realize that regulation is one thing and climate change is a separate thing. But it depends on his target audience.
Milliseconds for this to occur, and it's one of the first steps in forming an opinion. But it's also super important because every memory, every thought, and everything afterward can be tainted by that hot cognition opinion. The psychologists who published this paper think the reason that people don't believe the evidence is because we prejudge everything with our emotions. And it's not just politics that can cause this. Sad music, attraction to the person who is speaking, or the opposite, even the weather can affect your true feelings on pretty much everything. But that's just one model out of many different communication theories. Emotions do affect everything we do, but we can fight that natural tendency to react emotionally to evidence by thinking. It's simple, but it's pretty powerful.
So again, me listening to this, I kind of lose a little interest in it where he's saying, okay, keep your emotions in check and think. I think I do that anyway. But maybe it's targeted towards a younger audience who tends to be a little more emotional and maybe, leaps to conclusions, that kind of thing. Looking at the presentation and, he's kind of got the grungy type shirt on and the scruffy beard going. I think they're trying to, hit the teens, 20s, maybe early 30s population here.
The problem is that takes energy and effort. Humans have a natural tendency, according to early 20th century social psychologist Kurt Lewin, to resist change. Thinking is hard. He says we like the status quo and our inherent opinion because we value the groups we belong to now. Change means inviting discomfort into our social reality. It's so much easier to say, I don't believe you, you're challenging my status quo or my default or my social reality, depending on the model. And even though I've never read anything on what you're talking about, I feel it's bad and will fight not to expend energy to think about it. The moral...
Again, this part I kind of see targeted towards a younger audience because they're more willing to change and break social groups and social norms. I think people 40s, 50s, 60s, they're kind of set in their ways, set in their life, and they don't want to hear about problems sometimes. So I could see where an older audience would be guilty of, that preconceived notion that's saying, okay, yeah, climate change, whatever, I won't be here to really experience, won't bother me type thing. So I think he is trying to reach a younger audience here and get them to kind of change and think about what they do.
All of this story, as I see it, based on this research, is people don't believe in science because it requires we think, we evaluate, and we reevaluate, and all of those things are hard. At times, science does feel unnatural. It asks us to question and be skeptical and to debate as objectively as possible. All things that we don't naturally do very well. It's a skill we can learn if cultivated and encouraged, though. So, knowing this, if you do want someone to believe your evidence, don't appeal to their emotions if you can. Appeal instead to their curiosity. Avoid presenting evidence that will trigger joy or anger or fear or disgust. Instead, trigger their thinking caps, their cognition. And if I haven't you with any of this, maybe rewatch this video. If you like thinking about how we think about
So again, he finishes it up and he says, you know, if you didn't quite get everything, go ahead and rewatch the video. As it could be possibly over some people's heads or just too much to take in at one time, particularly a younger viewer, you know, might be on the phone or doing whatever at the same time. So again, I think this is targeted towards a younger audience. The last thing is what is omitted. I think what was really omitted for me is if we go back to the car going off the road into the river, what do we do about it? You know, we got to fix this now. He doesn't really go into that. You know, I think, you know, he brought it up and kind of made an important point about it, but it's ironic that at the end, he gives us no solution. You know, what can these young people do? How can they, you know, make changes in their own life, in their own community, maybe influence public policy? He really should spend an extra minute or two on that, I believe. And that was the big omission for me. Okay, thank you very much.